All right. And so what we can do today is kind of continue with the Dhamma as it goes, and also can do a bit of review
Mm-hmm.
because they go together. So let's start back with the Eightfold Noble Path. That the Eightfold Noble Path is, in fact, uh, a key or the integral part of the teachings of the Buddha. That the Buddha, in fact, says that he only teaches one thing, and that is dukkha, dukkha nirodha,
Mm-hmm.
which means that uh, while everyone has moments of peacefulness and quiet, that very, very few people are disturbed 100% of their time,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and that these people generally don't last very long. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
they can become the CEO, but then he'll croak. But he also become the prisoner in jail. But
Mm-hmm.
most of us have time to time during the day when we have a more natural state, or what Bhikkhu Buddhadasa talks about is void mind. Now, what we mean by void mind here is not a thoughtless mind, completely thoughtless, but that it's void of any harmful thing. That when we're really little kids, we spend quite a lot of our time in joyful things. We play. We become curious. We climb trees and we dig holes in the ground for no reason other than the enjoyment of it.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes we write on the wall. Well, if mom comes in and catches a kid writing on the wall, she's going to get unhappy and upset. And later in life, that child will remember not the 10 minutes or the hour he spent writing on the wall. He's going to remember his mom getting angry at him.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that? Because we have this stuff called instinctual behavior, and the instincts are supposedly to keep us alive. But that humans are best developed when we change that instinctual behavior into wisdom so that we start living our lives in a state of wisdom rather than in a state of instincts. This dichotomy is actually known in every culture. When I was a
Mm-hmm.
child in church, they would talk about your head or your heart as if the heart were somehow more important or more valuable, your feelings. But the teachings of the Buddha is exactly the opposite of that. That all of our trouble, all of our heartache comes from the heart, comes from the
Mm-hmm.
instincts, comes from the deep. And that when we develop wisdom, then now we're smart enough to stay out of all of our trouble. And so this is what one's right view is all about, is that developing that viewpoint or that wisdom so that we can stay out of trouble and live a happy, comfortable life.
Mm-hmm.
So right view comes first, but that when the reason for the Eightfold Noble Path is to bring the mind into a state of wholeness or the state of unification, where all of the factors of the mind are working together rather than only bits and pieces of it. In that regard, what we mean is then the wisdom part of the mind is not going to destroy or to take over the instincts, but
Mm-hmm.
rather the wiser ways are going to know the instincts and to be able to manage them well so that a person becomes whole and integrated. And we
Okay.
do that through investigation and through the development of wisdom.
Okay.
So, this is what it's all about. Now, the Buddha talks about right noble view, in relationship to wrong view and ordinary right view. There is a wrong view,
Okay.
and, and then there is an ordinary right view, and then
Mm-hmm.
there's the supramundane right view, or the noble right view.
Okay. Okay.
Now, the ordinary right view, excuse me, let's go for the wrong view first.
Okay.
Wrong view, basically the heart of wrong view is I can get away with it. I can harm others and not suffer any harm on my own.
Mm-hmm.
I can hurt people, or I can take what I want. So this is one's wrong view without having to pay the cost.
Mm-hmm.
They also have kind of the point of what's the use of doing anything of any value for the
Yes.
future. Okay, so they don't understand the law of karma in the sense of getting good results from good behavior and bad results from bad behavior. The wrong view is that no, I can go and do what I want to do.
Okay.
We find that very common within religious groups. They almost have the idea that because I am in this religion, I can go and do what I want to do. I can go follow my heart, and I can get away with it because at least I'll get forgiveness.
Yes.
I see that in both Christianity and in Islam. So this is one's wrong view. One's right view then is no, you can't get away with it.
Mm-hmm.
That you will, if you do wrong action, you will get, or if you do dark actions, you will get dark results, and if you do bright actions, you will get bright results. So
Okay.
now you have the argument basically between the parent and the child, where the mom is saying, you got to do this, and the kid says, I don't want to do that, and she says, you've got
Mm-hmm.
to. Okay, so this is a dialogue between ordinary right view and wrong view, and that in fact our whole society now is built upon ordinary right view with punishments for wrong view or punishments for wrong actions.
Okay.
All right, so
So,
um, you have basically this that both of the wrong view and the right view have magical thinking built in, especially ordinary
magical
right
what?
view. Magical thinking.
Okay.
Magical thinking or delusional thinking.
Uh-huh.
But magical thinking is easier to understand as magical thinking uh, when it's airy-fairy.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of that is, for instance, you cannot get away with it means that you've got to have some sort of police that are very, very good at their jobs so that you, in fact, can't get away with it. But most crime in the West is, in fact, in any country, most crimes never solved. The
Yes.
police never do solve crimes very
Yeah.
much. They do some, but not many.
Mm-hmm.
But the whole quality of ordinary right view is the quality of trying to control people. So ordinary right view is what governments are based upon. The idea that you can pass laws to make people live together so that they will cooperate and not hurt each other so much.
Okay.
The problem with ordinary right view is that it does not eliminate suffering. So
Yeah,
suffering
indeed.
is there whether you have right view or wrong view, there's still suffering involved.
Yeah, because it works by repression only.
And so the whole idea then of the Buddha is no, there's a higher right view, and that right view based in wisdom is also based in investigation.
Mm-hmm.
To where ordinary right view is based upon a set of conclusions. In supramundane right view, we generally do not come to conclusions for the long term, long
Mm-hmm.
lasting things. That things, in fact, are more temporary. So our super mundane right view has more to do with this moment rather
Mm-hmm.
than over the long haul, because we don't know how the long haul is going to be. That's why that kind of right view is ordinary, is because it doesn't solve all of life's problems. And not only that, but like with the government, the more rules the government makes just means more people will be looking for more loopholes to go do what they want to do and get away with it.
Yeah.
All right, so it's better to be able to, if any individual has the opportunity, is to go to train in and learn and understand noble right view, because ordinary right view and wrong view are both dangerous. Now, one thing to understand, and that is everybody does a little bit of all three of them throughout the day, but
Mm-hmm.
that everyone will have kind of an existential life position. For instance, a mobster will have wrong view, to where
Mm-hmm.
a priest will have ordinary right view, but then that priest still thinks that sometimes he can get away with it.
Okay. It is like based on that Hinduist uh, personality characterization that it has like the tapas and the sati. I think so. There are three types of personality. One is very angry, and the other one is like neutral and lethargic, and the other one is like more full of wisdom. It's based on that?
No, not at all.
Okay.
That in fact you could go so far as to say that the three things that you were mentioning actually come out of an area of psychology that was in development in the 1930s. It's kind of like a primitive psychology, and that you could go so far as to say that the angry one would be one of wrong view,
Mm-hmm.
and that the ordinary right view is the active one, and the noble right view would be passive. But
Yeah, the
that
no
doesn't fit
action
so
type.
right. So, but it doesn't fit exactly that way,
Okay.
and in fact, people don't fit that personality system that way anyway.
Yeah.
Uh, so it's kind of primitive, but I understand what you're talking about, and so you
Yeah,
could
it
say,
is
yeah, we
black
can.
white.
hmm All right. So now that we're beginning to understand right view, noble right view, right noble right view then is used in conjunction with sati and
Mm-hmm.
one's noble right effort. When you have right noble sati, right noble effort, and right noble view, then these things will work together. They will run and circle around each other, and that we work with that in the practice of Anapanasati that
Okay.
brings about the fourth item, which is right attitude,
Mm-hmm.
one's right noble attitude. Now,
Mm-hmm.
when people begin practice, they begin practice with ordinary right view, but
Mm-hmm.
eventually, when we come to a certain stage in practice, that's when that view becomes more noble, and that the distinction between the two of them is that ordinary right view has selfishness in it, but the noble right view is not selfish. It's
Okay.
altruistic. We're not looking at it from our own perspective or our own point of view. We're looking at it from a human point of view, or looking at it from a larger group, to where ordinary right view generally has to do with what's going to happen to me.
Yes.
My wrong actions bring about my uh, own punishment. And the way to avoid punishment is by not behaving wrongly.
Mm-hmm.
But once we get the right noble attitude, that noble attitude, along with the other factors bring about a mindset that is naturally free from wrongdoing because we don't want anything. So we're not going to take anything if we don't want anything. And so the noble way of looking at it is not that we try to follow the rules to gain some advantage, but rather because we already have the advantage, we kind of naturally follow the rules. The very
Mm-hmm.
high quality rules that some people set up, they could see that, oh, we can live well if we follow these rules. But basically, what they're talking about is the way of life of someone who is free from suffering.
I see.
So, uh, this Eightfold Noble Path, then, that we're talking about, has a component of morality, and it has the component of wisdom, and it has the component of training, or the gathering together quality, which we would
Okay.
call samadhi. And so when this training process completed and all the things are gathered together, this is what we mean by the word samadhi. In the West, and I know where it came from the translations, bad translations originally. Uh, the, the stuff that's in Pali, huge Pali canon, is translated into English because the original translators were Christians, and therefore Buddhism has a lot of Christian influence with it in the terminology that's used that is often not correct understanding of Buddhism. That the guys who were doing it, they understood a little bit about the Asian languages and Eastern, let us say, Indo-European languages, but they did not understand Buddhism at all. And for that
Mm-hmm.
reason, the original translations and the lexicons were still suffering under that problem of not knowing exactly what the words mean. The word that I'm picking on right now is the word samadhi, because the word samadhi does not mean concentration. And yet,
Yeah.
many times
That's what I learned. Yeah.
it's translated into the word concentration, and
Mm-hmm.
that gives students then a misunderstanding about how to do their meditation practice, because we're not practicing to concentrate the mind, we're practicing to unify all of the various aspects of the mind.
Mm-hmm.
That's a bit of a different viewpoint, because when people say that they were going to practice concentration meditation, they often do what they think of as called going deep.
Yeah, that's what I did. It was based on
Going
this feel.
based on going deep and maybe
Yeah.
putting in some effort to do that, to where the actual teachings of the Buddha is to wake up, to brighten. Don't go deep, go high.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Don't dig a pit, climb a mountain.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so this is what we mean when we're talking about sati, is to actually to wake up, to get the mind bright, not to go deep. Another quality about going deep is that generally um, the mind is not pure, because the mind is not completely free from the hindrances. And
Mm-hmm.
so what we really need to do in our right view is enough of an investigation to tell that most of what the mind is doing is actually preventing us from being in the state that we want to be in. That's why they're called hindrances.
I see.
So most of the kind of thoughts that a meditator will have while he is meditating is actually just more hindrance. And
Mm-hmm.
so he sees hindrance, he knows hindrance, and this brings in the word dukkha. The word dukkha actually is wrongly translated into the word suffering. In fact, if you go down the street and you ask people one after another, oh, I've got some Buddhism here, I'll give you if you're suffering, and everybody will say, no, I'm not suffering. But everybody will admit that there is lots of times in their life when they are dissatisfied.
Yes, yes.
So this is what dukkha is that it's being in a state of dissatisfaction.
Mm-hmm.
And so the whole teaching of the Buddha is to learn to see this dissatisfaction, get to know it well enough. I almost said to get to know it very well, but getting to know it very well often means that we go deep into it. We
Mm-hmm.
don't need to know it very well. We only need to know it enough to know that it is painful, that it is harmful, that it is dissatisfying, and that's all we need to know about it, is to get out of it enough to be able to step aside and not step in it.
Okay.
So a kind of way of thinking about it is, imagine that you were on a pasture that had cattle at the other end of the pasture, but this is their pasture and they've been in it all the time, all over the place. To get over to the other side of the pasture where the cows are, you can either just think, I'm going over there, and you're watching the cows and you get closer and closer to them. If you go that way, by the time you get there, your boots are going to be completely covered with green yuck called cow pies. That in
Mm-hmm.
fact, if you're going to go to the other side of that pasture over there, you need to watch every step you take to make sure that you're not stepping in a pile of cow pie.
Okay.
That's the way that we have to learn to live our life,
Mm.
is to not look at the cattle way on the other side of the pasture, but to start watching every step.
I see.
Every step so that we can avoid stepping in the cow pie.
Mm-hmm.
But when we begin to get started, we recognize, wait a minute, almost every place I step is cow pie. We got to find a way of getting some of this stuff out of the way so we can at least figure out what dry land or the floor actually is.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is the way that we begin to practice, is to recognize that uh, we have to see these cow pies. We have to be able to see our own crap, or see our own bullshit, or to see our own hindrance. Aha, I see you, Mara, is the
Yeah.
language that the Buddha used. Aha, I can see that stuff. And this is the basis of the practice, which is one's right view, to
Okay.
investigate to see that what the mind is doing right now is actually not all of that beneficial at all. It's not that wholesome. That we need to do something new with the mind. And the basic thing that we need to do with the mind is to throw whatever it was in the mind that we saw out and put something better in the mind.
Which would be the gladdening of the mind.
That's the gladdening of the mind. That's the
Okay.
process of gladdening the mind, is to put
Yeah,
something better in the
that's
mind.
the part I have some difficulties on doing. I can like see the things that are troubling me, and I can like even clear my mind, but I can't quite get to the part of gladdening the mind consistently.
All right, well, there's different ways that we can use that language. A lot of students have and they say, well, I can tell myself to be happy,
Yeah,
but I'm not happy.
yeah, yeah. I face that a
Or
lot. I
that
did
that
that
I
the past couple of days.
Okay, so a way that we can start with this is that instead of talking ourselves into being happy when we
Yeah.
don't feel like being happy, we can at least go to the point of relaxation, to at least feel relieved that the mind is free from the hindrances.
Mm.
That, wow, boy, I'm glad I don't have to think about that fight I had with Aunt
Okay.
Susie.
So
Okay.
relief as a degree of happiness.
Believe me, of course it is. Relief is a degree of happiness.
Okay. Okay.
Then, in fact, they're very closely related.
Yeah. And it kind of takes off the edge of like when I told myself I was happy, even though I didn't feel like that, it would feel like I was fooling myself in some way. like telling me that I am what I not feel. It
So
sounded
in
kind of
that
like,
way, you've just substituted one hindrance from another
oh,
because neither one of you are actually giving yourself the feeling of feeling good.
yeah, exactly. What is
Right.
this second hindrance?
So the right way to practice is to recognize hindrances, all of them as hindrance, including the one that you just mentioned. Telling yourself to feel good and not feeling good, that's a hindrance. These are
Okay.
also what we would call affirmations, and the books are filled with this. Self-help books have all kinds of affirmations about, and the story is about the teenage girl standing in front of the mirror in the bathroom, telling herself that she's a princess and she's going to have a wonderful day. Well,
Mm-hmm.
really, she doesn't believe it.
Yeah, yeah, it's kind of like it.
So we need to work with the real. And the real is perhaps changing the language that we use so that you can get the actual sensation of what we're looking for, the actual experience of relief. That in fact the hindrances are what keeps us from being satisfied in our life.
Mm-hmm.
And so getting rid of the hindrances should be quite a relief. The Buddha actually gives five. He gives five analogies for five hindrances, but that the five analogies don't necessarily fit one on one. One analogy for another analogy for another hindrance, etc., like
Mm-hmm.
that. But basically, these five analogies are just for the hindrances in general.
Okay.
That when you free yourself from the hindrances, then it's like this analogy. Okay, so the first analogy is that we are sick. We're in the hospital or that we're in the bed and that we don't feel good, that we feel sick. And then later we feel better and we're ready to get out of the bed and go do something. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
this is like having the hindrances then in the mind is like the mind being sick. And that when we're free from the hindrances, that's like the mind being well. So that's quite a relief. Boy, it feels good to not feel bad now, you
Yeah.
know, that I'm not sick. Another analogy is the analogy of going to jail. That when we are in hindrances, we have no freedom. That we're locked in, and we're locked into the hindrances. That they own us. For an
Mm-hmm.
example of that is when we're angry, we say, I am angry, which means the anger now controls me. I have no choice other than to be angry.
To the point it
Or
takes my identity.
the anger takes the identity, exactly. The bad feelings, the hindrances will take over your identity and put you in jail, and you have no freedom.
So if I have a lack of motivation, for instance, lack of motivation for like being happy, that's a hindrance in itself.
Yes, yes, it is. And in fact, that would be the hindrance of sloth and torpor. And what we
Mm-hmm.
mean by sloth and torpor is both uh, when the mind is really tired, when it doesn't have enough energy, that's the sloth or the tiredness. Excuse
Mm-hmm.
me, that's the torpor when the mind is just not functioning. But
Okay.
sloth, which has the quality of doubt with it, is what's the point? An example of why should I do meditation? I'm not getting anything out of it anyway. And this is part of the reason why most people quit meditation, is
Yeah.
because they're not getting anything out of it.
Mhm.
And the reason they're not getting anything out of it is because they're in the hindrance of what's
Yes.
the bother? What's the point? I'm not getting anything out of it.
I get like minor version of this because I know that is going to bring me to relief, and I actually know this for a fact because of the examples of it. But at the same time, I cannot help like the present slowness or the present doubt.
Well, what we can do though is we can wake up to these doubts to see that these are doubts,
Mm-hmm.
or to see that these are questions about that. And by seeing these things as for what they are, now we know that we can do something about it. Until we see it clearly, we're just kind of stuck in it. Oh, what's the point?
Mm-hmm.
Well, we actually have various levels of waking up.
Okay.
Everybody wakes up a little bit in the morning when they get out when before they get out of bed. When they first wake up, they don't get out of bed. They stay in bed.
Yeah.
All right, and we set the alarm or whatever like that. That means that we're not really fully woken up. We just wake up
Mm-hmm.
just a little bit. But once we wake up more completely, now we're ready to get out of bed. Time to get up. So when we wake up with our sati in meditation, we don't want to only wake up enough to see what's going on. We want to wake up enough to get out of it.
Yes.
Okay, this is what we mean by waking up to the dukkha, is to say not just all the mind is wondering, or the mind is worried, or the mind is asking questions about what's the point or what's the meaning of life. Instead of recognizing that as what the mind is doing, we also are woken up enough to know that, wow, it's doing that, and that's painful. It's
Mm-hmm.
painful to be stuck into that position.
It's
And by
like getting
seeing
off
the
of
dukkha,
meds.
so by waking up enough to see that those thoughts are dukkha, now we can actually do something about it. And
Okay.
that's when we say, aha, I can see that doubt. Aha, I see you, Mara. Aha,
Mm-hmm.
I can see that crap. Or as one student just says, wow, what bullshit. And I said, yeah, so now we can say, aha, I see you, bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
I see what the mind is doing. So this is the fully waking up, is to recognize that I do not have to do that.
Mm-hmm.
That just because the mind is in the habit of doing that doesn't mean that I've got to. No, I can wake up. I can wake up completely. I can throw that stuff out and come into a state of relaxation. That just being free from that stuff is kind of like getting out of jail.
I see.
And so the third analogy is like being a servant, that you've
Mm-hmm.
got to do stuff for someone. Like the servant of the king's got to get up before the king, get his clothes out ready, and then work on with the king all day long. And after the king goes to bed, only then can the servant go to bed. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so this is very much like being in jail, except that while our freedom is not constricted, our time is.
Okay.
And so being a servant is actually very much like having a job, in the sense that we can't think the thoughts that we want to think. We got to think the thoughts that are associated with the job. Well, guess what? When we sit down to meditation, what do? Well, we're in the habit of thinking about the job, so we might as well think about the job some more. Rather than saying, no, now is the time to not think about jobs, any kind of job, out job. I have
Mm-hmm.
no work to do right now. I am free from work. I am not a servant. I'm free
Mm-hmm.
now. And so we come out of that hindrance of finding something to do. The next analogy is like being in debt. I don't know whether you're in debt or not, but I imagine everyone that I talk to will say that, oh, it is better to be out of debt.
Yeah, of course.
It is better to own a car outright rather than own a car and make payments on it every month. Right? It is
Mm-hmm.
better to be free from debt. Well, what are we in debt to are the things that we think should be paid off. or to come. So
Like
basically,
guilty.
wanting things that we don't have is like being in debt for those things. And
Okay.
when we pay the debt off, then we can get them. But if I don't want anything, then I'm free from debt. I don't owe anybody anything.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we come to the state of mind of I don't owe anybody anything. And then the next analogy, the final analogy, is the analogy of being out on in the wilderness, perhaps with a camel caravan with all of our goods, and we're out on the trail, and there's the danger the camel could broke his leg. There's dangers that the snakes. There's danger from thieves. There's all kinds of dangers out there, and I've got all my goods on that travel. But then when I get to the rest stop or finally home, once I get home, I can relax. I've done the job, and not only that, but I've arrived safely.
Mm-hmm. I made it travel.
Okay, so these five analogies for the five hindrances is like we feel like that we're healthy, not sick. How do we feel healthy? Is by breathing well. Because people who are not breathing very well and they're shutting down, they feel a little sick. Being in prison means that we cannot do the things that we want to do. We feel bound and constrained by our own thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
We also feel like that we've got work to do. And so we think about being a servant rather than, no, I've got no work to do now, nothing to do. We have the feeling that we're in debt and those debts have to be paid. But after we come free from the hindrances, now we don't owe anybody anything. We're not obligated for anything.
Okay.
Not only do we have no work to do, but we have no obligations for any future work. Everything is good right now.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, the hindrance of being on a travel. And I've been out traveling in the past, and in fact, in recent years, I've had to go for visa to the other island and be on the boat where all of the tourists are. And every tourist has got three bags. He's got a backpack in the front, he's got a bigger backpack in the back, and then he's got this suitcase that he's carrying around. And
Mm-hmm.
wow, is that a bunch of drudgery? And I
Mm-hmm.
could walk onto that boat with both hands empty, carrying nothing. And that gives me a lot of freedom because when people are carrying a lot of baggage around, they have to watch it every minute. You can't go up to the ticket counter, or in fact, you want to put the bags over there, which means now you got to have someone with you, a guard. And that person is probably your friend, so now they've got all of their bags. So you got two people and six bags, and what a mess it is to be out traveling.
Yeah.
And so when those people get into their hotel room, finally they can say, whew, can take a load off.
Yeah.
Uh, so that's how we are also. The mind is out traveling, it's out wandering, it's going all over the place, it's restless.
Mm-hmm.
We need to bring it to the point of where we can settle down.
Mm-hmm.
And so these five hindrances, there's a good analogy for us to understand that these five analogies point out these five hindrances that keep us from being relaxed, happy, and at peace. So that if we remove these five hindrances, naturally we're going to be at gladdened and at peace. But it still requires that change because we've got to take the effort to throw these hindrances out of the mind. First, we have to see that this is a hindrance. We have to wake up first before that. We firstly have to wake up so that we can now apply right view to see this is a hindrance. Out it goes. And then now we take the right effort to throw it out. That right effort then is actually the gladdening the mind by putting something new in the mind. So the question is, what new, good, wholesome, valuable thing are you going to put in the mind to throw the old thought out? The Buddha's idea was, aha, I see you, Mara. I got you.
Mm-hmm. The active thoughts, right?
And once I have that thought, I see you, Myra. Now we can take a deep, long breath. It's important for the breathing to be long and deep. A lot of meditation teachers in some books say merely to watch the breath.
Yeah, I found that.
And so then the mind is really easy to wander away into hindrances. But
Yeah.
if you practice Anapanasati the way that is specified in the sutta, and that is a long, deep in-breath and a long, deep out-breath, and we understand this long, deep in-breath as a long, deep in-breath,
I
and we
can
understand
prolong the
the long
breath.
out-breath. Go ahead.
I can prolong the breath like for several seconds, like more than 5, or it has to be 5 seconds.
Um,
Because I feel like I relax more.
I would say, okay, 5 seconds on the in breath and 5 seconds on the out breath, and maybe a couple of seconds between the in breath, between the out breath and the next new in breath.
But it does harm if I go higher, like if I take a breath of like 7
Eight,
seconds, 8 seconds.
8, 8, and 4 is also a common. If you do 5,
Okay.
5, 2, that's 12 seconds, and that's 5 breaths a minute. 8, 8, 4 is 20 seconds or 3 breaths a minute.
Okay, I'll try that one. 8 seconds sounds good.
Okay, but you take a long deep breath in the sense that we don't want to fill the lungs up 100%, nor do we empty them to zero. But that most people, when they're breathing on a shallow basis, they go like between 40 and 60. So when they're full up, they're only at about 60%. When they breathe out, they're only at about 40%, but they do it fairly quickly. We're elongating that so that we bring in more air, and so I would say that we were putting it up to about 80%. On the in breath, we're about 80% full, and then when we're empty, we go down to about 30%. So 80-30, 80-20, something like that. So that we breathe out, we sigh, we let it all go.
Yeah,
But we're not
yeah.
trying to push all the air out. We're making it really easy. Easy breathing.
Okay.
Long, deep, slow in breath and long, deep, slow out breath. And by doing that, we allow the mind then to settle around that kind of breathing as opposed to easily walking away. But even though the mind will stay on that kind of breathing, still the thoughts will be there. And some students will say, all the thoughts are in the background while I'm watching the long, deep in breath and the
No,
long, deep out breath. Still the
it's
thoughts are
shifting
in
too
the
fast.
background. Pardon?
It's shifting too fast. So I think it's at the same time, but it's not.
All right. Well, don't think of them in the sense of being in the background, but thinking of it in the sense of mind moments.
Yeah.
That this mind moment you're watching the breath, this mind moment there's a thought, this mind moment they're on the breath, this mind moment they're on the thought.
When you talk about like mind moment, it has a quality of time, but it has a quality of some other thing, like space time. What is this mind time you said?
Well, like I was pointing out, this next mind moment, you actually are thinking the thought, or you're looking at the thought, and then the next mind moment, you're back to watching the breath. So this mind moment thing that I'm talking about is just a way of where our attention or where our focus is. Because within one breath, if you're down to 3 breaths to 5 breaths a minute, then that means that in that breath you have lots and lots of time, and the mind is fast. Oh, the mind is so fast. But because you now have this framework of watching the long, deep in breath and long, deep out breath, that means that there's a moment or a point in sati for that in breath, each in breath and each out breath, we will come back to the breathing. So we've got
Mm-hmm.
this anchor. We keep coming back to
Yeah.
the same little place over and over and over again, which means now the mind cannot wander so far away.
Is the one-pointedness?
Not looking for one pointedness.
Okay.
I don't know where that word one pointedness came from because we're not looking for it.
Okay.
If you're sitting in the jungle and are sitting one pointedness, the tiger can come up and eat you because
Mm-hmm.
you're not paying attention to what's going on around you. I don't think that one pointedness is a goal. If there's a goal, I would say all pointedness rather than one pointedness.
Okay.
All right, let's expand our awareness. Let's get a broad way of looking at things rather than a narrowing down.
Okay.
That narrowing down or that one point focusedness is again around that word concentration or in the quality of going deep. What we're doing here is we're developing exactly the opposite of that. We're developing waking up.
Mm-hmm.
To wake up, to see what the mind is doing so that you can put in the mind what you want to have in there. And going deep is actually just investigating what's in the mind, which is just rummaging around in one's basement
Mm-hmm.
when you could live in the penthouse.
I see.
Okay, so we need to take our elevator of the mind up, not down.
Mm-hmm. So when I am breathing, if I'm not like focusing in one point, it means I'm not focusing like in the nostrils, for example. It means I have to focus on the entire breath system, like in the nose, then in the throat, and in the belly.
You can, in fact, step 3 of Anapanasati is to experience the body. And in a way,
Body.
what that means is to go through the body and figure it out. We don't generally pay much attention to the body. And
Mm-hmm.
so when we're breathing, we're actually beginning to wake up the body.
Yeah,
When you're
I
breathing,
try
you
to
can feel the
refrain from
movement.
that.
Pardon?
I try to refrain from paying attention to the whole body. I try to pay attention only to the breathing and the breathing into the nostrils only. I've been doing
Uh,
that.
you, there's no real reason to think about nostrils.
Okay,
The stuff about nostrils comes from much later literature. It is not in the suttas.
okay.
The sutras does not talk about the nose tip or the nostrils, or does it talk about nimitta in the sense of anapanasati?
Okay.
Okay, that we're not actually practicing that kind of meditation right now. That what we're doing instead is waking things up,
Okay.
not shutting it down.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we're waking things up. We're getting it bright. We're going to get the mind free from hindrances.
But I
And
still have that doubt to where I should pay attention. If not the nostrils, where should I locate my breathing?
in your breathing,
Like the air in itself?
well, in the fact that the body is breathing, so you look at the body movements. What does the body do
Okay.
for an in breath? What
Okay.
does the body do for an out breath? What is the touch of the cloth? What is the air on the skin? What is
Mm-hmm.
the movement of the cloth in relationship to the back? So when you're breathing in and out, you want to begin to
Oh,
open
so
the
it's
body
very
up.
broad.
Very broad, right?
Okay, I was doing like the complete opposite. I was doing so wrong then. Okay, okay.
Yes. So we want to get to know the entire body, the whole body,
Okay.
and the so we can see the diaphragm, we can see the abdomen, we can see the chest, we can feel the throat. We have ample opportunity to investigate the body,
So
to
anything
investigate,
related to the
to notice.
breathing goes.
Pardon?
Anything related to the breathing goes.
Yes, including our thoughts.
Okay. Okay.
Because this is where we come in now. If you can learn to control your breath, you can learn to control your thoughts. If you can
Mm-hmm.
learn to control your thoughts, then you can learn to control your feelings.
Okay. Okay.
If you can learn to control your feelings, then you can choose not to be angry. You can be happy instead.
Mm-hmm. Now
Okay,
it makes
so
so much more sense. Okay.
uh,
Okay.
all
Thank you.
right, so we're going to learn to control the body by breathing well, by
Uh-huh.
getting the body oxygenated,
Yeah, yeah.
by and all of that. And now also we're going to get the mind itself to under a bit of control, because we're only going to allow wholesome thoughts.
Okay.
What are wholesome thoughts? Well, we could say that wholesome thoughts are different than unwholesome thoughts, because unwholesome thoughts will take us out of our state of being secure, satisfied, at peace, at rest, um, into a bit of fear, or into a bit of anger, or into a bit of restlessness, or into any of that kind of stuff that would be associated with hindrance. In fact, they're all listed there. Wanting things we don't have, putting up with stuff we don't like, which would be at an extreme level, would be anger because we don't like things. All of that stuff can be considered a hindrance. And so we want to be free from those hindrances so that we can think wholesome thoughts rather than unwholesome thoughts.
Okay.
So thoughts of wanting, thoughts of ill will, thoughts of harming someone, thoughts of harming ourselves, uh, um, thoughts of going and getting drunk, or thoughts of going buying something, thoughts of fixing an old broken laptop, all of that kind of stuff is actually, then those kind of thoughts would be unuseful for this present moment.
Okay.
Another one would be thoughts of the bank. Let's say that tomorrow you have to go to the bank, but thinking about the bank today is useless.
Mm-hmm.
You only need to think about the bank enough to get the stuff together that you need to go and take to the bank. And other than that, every time we think about the bank, it's completely useless. That's like
Yes.
being a servant to the bank when you don't have to think about the bank at all.
Mm-hmm.
And yet,
Mm-hmm.
most people, when they go to the bank, they've been to the bank in their mind 100 times before they
Yeah.
actually physically walk into the bank.
Mm-hmm.
So now that we know we don't have to think about any of that stuff, we can think about wholesome things instead.
Okay.
So we begin to think about wholesome things and leave away unwholesome things. Now,
So,
an example of that would be the restless mind. When the mind is restless, when it's a monkey mind, when the reason that there is restlessness there is because there's something underneath it that's driving it.
okay.
And what is underneath that's driving it? You could say that would be anxiety or tension, or maybe even uh, doubt that's built into fear. That the basic bottom line is fear, and that we're out then looking for safety and security. Well, we need to recognize that that safety and security is now missing in the mind, and instead of being out looking for it, we can say, never mind, throw that stuff out. I can take a deep breath and feel comfortable and secure right now.
Okay.
What I'm thinking about is not going to make me feel comfortable and secure, so out that stuff goes, and I'm going to intentionally think thoughts about being comfortable, secure, happy, at rest, at peace. Okay, so we
Okay.
cultivate that sense of joy. We cultivate that sense of um, satisfaction, and we can talk ourselves into it. But in the talking ourselves into it, it's not like talking ourselves into it in a way that we don't believe it's going to happen, but
Mm-hmm.
rather talking ourselves into it because we know that it will happen. The example of that would be, instead of saying, may all beings be happy, we can say, right now, I wish they were all as happy as I am.
Mm-hmm.
That's an example. The next kind of thing would be, this is good enough. Work with this is good enough. This is
Mm-hmm.
satisfying.
Okay. Okay.
That this is good enough. That's all we have to have. It may not be the very best good enough there is, but this is a skill to be developed. So we have to
Yeah,
develop
it's reasonable. Yeah.
the skill of being satisfied, the skill of being comfortable in this present moment, the
Okay.
skill of feeling safe right now. This is
Okay.
good enough.
Okay.
Okay? And so this is a skill that needs to develop. It's going to take some effort to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And also the effort to stay out of the hindrances, to stay out of the ordinary stuff, stay out of the ordinary mind, and come back into this stuff that's only wholesome.
Mm-hmm.
To make sure that the thoughts are wholesome thoughts, like this is good.
Okay.
Wow, I understand this breath. Oh, what a nice breath it is. Okay, so this is the kind of thoughts that we begin to develop. The thoughts of right now is marvelous.
Yes. And there is still a satisfaction involved in uh, learning the right way to do things to make yourself happy. For instance, when you taught me the right way of doing Anapanasati, um, I began to feeling more satisfied. Like, I got the technique right now.
Right. That's
And
where the confidence comes from, is because
yeah,
you know
yeah,
that you can do it right, and this is it.
yeah,
Exactly.
yeah, exactly. Yes,
So
I
you
felt
get
that.
results, and then those results give you the confidence to do it again, and then you get better results, and so our confidence begins to build.
Yeah, yeah.
And so does our satisfaction. As our confidence builds, our satisfaction builds.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this is actually now, in this relationship, this is how we practice the Eightfold Noble Path, is through
Mm-hmm.
one's right view, through one's right effort and right sati to remember to do this. We begin to develop the right attitude, and the right attitude is, I can do this. The
Mm-hmm.
right attitude is, wow, I feel really good.
I see.
And so begin to practice that right attitude of, I can do this. The
Okay.
attitude of being successful at it. The attitude of being satisfied.
Okay.
Okay? And you practice it that way, and now you'll begin to see a bit of difference. And it does take a while for students. Not actually, it takes a while to understand what a simple technique this is, but that it's so different than the way that we normally do things.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I get exactly that feeling.
Great. All right. Well, it's good to see you again, Arthur. Do you have any more questions about this?
Yeah, it's good to see you again too. I have one more question, and it's about the timing of my sessions. Like,
Okay.
when I am in the last session of the day,
Hang on a second. Okay. Sorry about that.
yeah,
A
it's
lot of
okay.
noise right
I see.
now. Okay. Ask your
Okay.
question again.
When I'm in the last session of the day, usually I feel like going for more minutes, 15 or 20 minutes. Can I do that, or I have to?
Sure. As long as you're enjoying your practice,
Okay, yes,
continue
I
to
get this
enjoy it.
feeling that I enjoy it, and then I want to continue it.
Sure.
But at the same time, I feel like I don't want to get. It's a tricky question because I feel like there is a degree of attachment if I want to stay more than 10 minutes. I don't know if it's a problem.
Let's talk about that later. But right now, I would say that when you're talking about this, the word attachment is in Western Buddhism a confusion. Basically, there are only four modes of attachment, and this is not one of the four modes of attachment. This is
Okay.
actually attaching to something useful, valuable, and wholesome.
Okay.
Okay? You're not clinging to things that cause suffering. You're just merely attaching yourself to something that's wholesome. Now, there's actually a sutta, which, by the name of it, is translated as one fortunate attachment.
Mm-hmm.
One fortunate attachment is to attach yourself to the here now.
Okay.
Well, that was exactly what you were doing.
Okay. I
You're
see.
attaching, right. So, right, attach yourself to the here now. Other things that are worthwhile attaching yourself to would be wholesome thoughts.
Okay.
Another thing to be attached to that would be worthwhile would be attaching yourselves to the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Noble Path, the teachings of the Buddha. This is
Okay.
something that's worthwhile attaching ourselves to.
Mm-hmm. I see.
And that attachment also is a way of looking at right effort.
Mm-hmm.
So let us say that there was a town that we were in that was full of poison. Everything was covered, say, with cooties. And so
Mm-hmm.
I've got to get out of town. And so I go
Mm-hmm.
to the train station and I get on the train. Well, I've got to get on the train. People will say, oh, well, if I'm in a town where everything is cooties and I can't touch anything, then that means I can't touch the train either. No, we
Mm-hmm.
got to touch the train to
I
get
see.
on the train
I
because the
see.
train's going to take us out of
Yeah.
town.
Yeah. I see. Okay.
Okay, so there are fortunate attachments. What are those fortunate attachments? The things that take us out of unfortunate attachments.
Mm-hmm.
One's right effort is the effort that it takes to bring an end to effort, to bring
Okay.
an end of work and dukkha.
Okay. Okay.
Okay?
Okay.
Does that answer that question easily, I
Yes,
hope?
absolutely. Yeah.
All right, so if you're sitting there and enjoying your practice, oh, just sit there and enjoy. Where else is there to go? What else is there to
Okay.
do? Okay.
Okay. Thank you so much. I see you
All
very
right.
soon.
We'll see you
Thank
later,
you.
Arthur. Okay, bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.